Microsoft just laid off 4,800 people, and Xbox fans should be paying attention. You know, every once in a while, a headline pops up that at first glance just looks like another corporate news story. Microsoft lays off 4,800 employees. Whatever. You read it, you shrug, and you move on. But I don't think people realize how massive this actually is, because we're not talking about some tiny company trying to save a few dollars. We're talking about Microsoft, one of the largest companies on the planet. And when a company that big suddenly says, yeah, we're letting go of nearly 5,000 people, you have to ask yourself why. More importantly, what does this mean for Xbox? Because that's the part that caught my attention. Reports are saying around 1,600 of those layoffs are coming from Xbox, with Microsoft continuing a broader reconstruction of its gaming division after spending almost $69 billion to acquire Activision Blizzard. So I immediately start thinking, what games are these people working on? Because whenever people hear the word layoffs, they imagine office workers sitting in cubicles doing paperwork. And that's not what this is. These are programmers, animators, environment artists, quest designers, writers, producers, and much, much more. The people who actually make these games happen. And here's something I think a lot of gamers overlook. AAA games today aren't made by 50 people anymore. They're made by hundreds, sometimes thousands. So imagine you're building a skyscraper. Now, remove 20% of the construction crew halfway through. Sure, eventually you'll probably finish it, but it's not getting done on the same schedule. Now think about games like that. I'm not saying any specific Xbox title is getting delayed. Nobody outside of Microsoft knows exactly which teams were affected. But if developers disappear, work doesn't magically continue at the same pace. Maybe features get cut, content gets reduced, maybe launch windows quietly move 6 months. Maybe an expansion you've been waiting on suddenly isn't announced this year. These things happen. We've seen it happen over and over again throughout the industry. And honestly, what worries me, not the layoffs themselves, although I hate seeing people lose their jobs, but what those layoffs usually signal. Because this is not happening in a vacuum. Over the last few years, we've watched the gaming industry go through wave after wave of layoffs. Studio closes, publishers merge, projects disappear, entire franchises get shelved before we even know they existed. And now one of the biggest companies in gaming is doing it too. That should make everybody stop and pay attention, especially when you remember what Microsoft owns now. Halo, Forza, Doom, Elder Scrolls, Fallout, Diablo, Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, Minecraft. That's an insane lineup, which makes this even stranger, because if a company with that many successful franchises is still looking for places to cut cost, what does that say about where the industry is headed? Personally, I think we're seeing the aftermath of companies expanding way too aggressively over the last several years. During the pandemic, gaming exploded. Everyone was hiring, studios were buying studios, publishers were spending billions. Now that things have slowed down, investors want profits. Executives start looking at spreadsheets, and unfortunately, people become the numbers. Then there's another angle to all of this that I don't really think people are thinking about. Microsoft has been pushing Game Pass harder than almost anyone had expected. They're investing heavily in cloud gaming. They're putting more Xbox games on other platforms. They're changing what it even means to own an Xbox. The company doesn't seem interested in winning the console war anymore. They seem interested in making Xbox a service that exists everywhere. Maybe these layoffs are part of that transition. Maybe Microsoft believes it can make games differently than it did 5 years ago. Or maybe they're simply cutting cost after one of the biggest acquisitions in gaming history. We honestly don't know yet, but what we do know is this. When thousands of people leave a company overnight, it affects the people still there. Projects change, timelines change, plans change. Sometimes entire games change. And that's why I think this story matters. Not because people like watching corporations make headlines, but because 6 months from now, or maybe a year from now, when an Xbox game gets delayed, or a project gets canceled, or a studio suddenly goes quiet, people are going to ask what happened. Well, this is usually where those stories begin. But I want to know what you guys think. Do you think Microsoft simply is just cleaning house after years of massive expansion? Or do you think that this is the beginning of a much bigger shift for Xbox? Let me know in the comments down below, and thank you for listening.